Hi, and welcome to this lecture on environmental adaptation animals. Now we will end on the respiration, to look on the real animals in the real environment, also on the free diving. And the diving is quite weird phenomena, because usually when you are diving, you need muscles to work. And for example, the heart rate is in the discrepancy. So the diving causes bradycardia, so the lower beat rate. And the muscle work, so when you are using your legs and your arms to swim or dive, it increases the heart rate, so causing a tachycardia. And at the same time, the same thing happens also in the metabolism. So the diving reflex is thought that, okay, now it's hypoxia. The metabolism is decreased. It's used aerobic and anaerobic energy production, but in the muscle work, it's always increasing the metabolism and using more aerobic energy production because that's more effective. And the third thing is on the circulation. So the vasoconstriction that we were discussing on the previous video, so closing down these non-essential organs to support as much oxygen as possible for the brains. But still, when we are using these muscles, it's causing vasodilation. So to lower the heart rate or increase it, to lower the metabolism or increase the metabolism, to get the blood vessels smaller or larger, that is the question. And let's look first on what is the difference on the forced and voluntary diving. So in the forced diving, we saw a little bit like this. So in the arteries, arterial hemoglobin, they are losing oxygen step by step. So after 20 minutes, there's maybe 20% of oxygen left in the hemoglobin. But then on the myoglobin, this concentration of oxygen, so the oxygen saturation is decreasing much faster. And at the same time, they are using then lactate. So the myoglobin loses this oxygen fast, but then when we are having these free diving elephant seals, you can see that it's much faster reducing the oxygen in the hemoglobin of the arteries and the veins. So it's quite much on the double speed. But the interesting thing is that because you are not closing down the circulation, so actually in the muscles, they are getting oxygen from the circulation to keep these myoglobin oxidized. And therefore, they are not producing lactate. So the diving is actually aerobic activity. So here is a vessel seal lactate accumulation. You can see that it increased very high within 60 minutes. But in the beginning, it doesn't rise at all. So before 20 minutes, it is not producing lactate. And why you are not producing lactate is because if you are taking glucose, producing pyruvate, you are then producing carbon dioxide instead of this lactate. So you are having oxygen. So therefore, they can use the oxidant aerobic activity, and still when they are diving, they are not, it's not like running, it's only increasing the energy consumption from the basal metabolic rate by 25 to 22%. So they are doing it quite much with energy saving. But then in the long distance, long lasting dive, the metabolic rate is reduced. So it's actually almost 20% below the basal metabolic rate. So when it's producing lactate, then it's closing down all the non-essential systems, and then it can reduce the metabolic rate. And this rest after the diving is only needed when you are having lactate. And you can see that, okay, there is a linear correlation. So how many minutes you must rest with different lactate acid concentration. So in these very long divings, so when you have 150 milligram per one, that means that, okay, you are resting for 2 hours. Okay, so that means that, okay, you can have some activity during the diving. But still, because the body shape of these seals, they can glide. So you can see that they can dive very deep without moving. So there is prolonged gliding. And then these red ones is the continuous stroking. So when they are moving the arms all the time. And therefore you are not increasing the metabolic rate very drastically. And you can see that, okay, it needs more activity when going up. But I think it knows that, okay, when going up, it can go to the surface and then get oxygen. And when they are having this muscle activity, that increase the speed. So when you have during the time of the flipper activity, you are increasing the speed. And then during these glidings, the speed is reduced. And what then happens? Okay, you don't have to be fastest seal to go there in the 300 meters, but you must do quite fast to get back to the surface, and that's why they are using more continuous stroking. Okay, then what about then the heart rate in the diving? Because if you are moving your muscles, then you need to have higher blood rate. And then if you are having the diving reflex, that will lower the heart rate. So in the short dives on the shallow waters, you can see that, okay, there's muscular activity can be quite minimal, and on the time when they are having this muscle activity, you can see that the heart rate is increasing. So this pale blue area looks pretty much like the bradycardia. But when the animal is going up, it's already starting higher cardiac activity because it's having this muscular activity. Then 2 times deeper you can see that the heart rate is lower, but it's not constant. So it's going up and down. And it's going up and down because it's moving. And in these very long divings, where it's also eating, and because it's hunting and eating, it's moving, and that affects that, okay, the heart rate is increasing. So it's not completely not using the heart during the dives, but it's using whenever it's needed. So when you need circulation for your muscles. Okay, what about then how it's regulated? How you can have either active or non-active heart? Well, for that reason we have autonomic nervous system. So when we have a dolphin, when it's diving, you can see that the minimal heart rate is reduced quite linearly. So that's showing quite much a clear bradycardia. But then in this seal, the heart rate is going up and down. So there's a high variation in the same depth. So they can increase it or decrease it at the same time. And therefore, this cardiac activity is dropping drastically in the dolphin. We had to remember that, okay, how this dolphin was having what kind of how much oxygen it was having in different organs, etc. It was completely different than in these seals. So it's decreasing depending on how long it's there in the how deep it is there in underwater, and how many strokes per minute. So if it's not using the strokes at all, the heart rate is very minimal. But then if it's moving the arms, then the heart rate is faster. And that's why it's using the parasympathetic diving. But in this seal, it's using parasympathetic and sympathetic at the same time. So that's why the heart rate is decreasing, but it's decreasing only maybe 50% or less. Whereas over here, it's decreasing from 120 to 40 or whatever. So it's much larger and faster in losing the cardiac rhythm or slowing the cardiac rhythm drastically in the dolphin versus the seal, because now the seal has both. It has the parasympathetic, and then it has also the sympathetic exercise response. Okay, what about then the heart and the temperature? We were in the previous video we were showing that, okay, when humans are trying to keep breath, so not breathing, it was affecting on the heart rate, but then the diving response was different in different temperatures. So the bradycardia depends on the water temperature, and the cold receptors are affecting on the sympathetic regulation, so causing tachycardia. But at the same time, when having the face in the water, we have the diving response that is causing parasympathetic stimulation. And in some cases this can be a danger combination. So they are interacting with each other, and there can be this autonomic conflict that can cause arrhythmias. So therefore you might lose the beat or get irregular beats, etc. And sometimes that happens also in the seas when they are diving. But the good point is that when you are when the temperature on the surrounding is cold, that also can have benefits for these diving mammals. So the seal can be cooled down, and if you have colder body temperature, then you are using much less oxygen, you are using much less energy, and you are producing much less lactate. So first of all, during the dive, we can see that the body temperature in the surface is lower. The core temperature is also reduced, but it's reduced much less. So the peripheral organs are cooled, and that will drop the blood temperature. This is on the weddell seal, so when it's diving, every time it dives, it will lower the blood temperature. And the heterothermy, having cold surface, hot inside, and then you have this circulation, that will drop a little bit the brain temperature. And this 3-degree drop in the brain temperature is energy saving. Actually, it saves 20% of the brain energy. So therefore, this diving seal is not using as much energy as it would in the surface, although it's moving. Thank you.